Hey everybody, this is Kane at Content Harmony, and today I am going to walk you through the process of creating a content brief in Content Harmony. So I've pulled up a keyword report here for responsive web design examples. So you're probably a hosting type of website if you're going to be producing blog content on something like this, maybe a web design agency. And you'll see when you first pull up a report, we put you right into the keyword report section. The content brief is a next step in our workflow. And we put you first on the intent tab of all the data tabs that we offer. And so we've got some other metadata along the top of the screen here, things like search volume, primary intent, average word count we saw, and then our difficulty metrics, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the first tab that we put you into is the search intent tab. And the reason for that is because when you're producing a content brief, and your goal here is to explain either to a writer, the outline and details of what you want in the content, who the content's for, or maybe perhaps you're doing the same thing, but for a client or a client's writing team, content production team, and you're telling them requirements for the content that they need to hit in order for it to have a good shot of ranking for SEO purposes and things like that. And so normally what you'd be doing is loading up a live version of the search results and clicking on some competitors and clicking on PAAs and things like that, and then copy and pasting data from here into a Google Doc and then going over to your keyword tool, Ahrefs or SEMrush or Moz, and copying and pasting keyword and volume types of data in, and then going to look at competitors and do keyword analysis on their pages. And so we try and collapse all that into a single set of reports. But before you get to all of that, it's important to know what the search intent of a certain query is so that you don't accidentally produce the wrong content. So that's why we start you out here in the search intent tab. Now, Content Harmony has put together kind of the industry's only keyword search intent classification system that focuses on breaking down intent beyond kind of traditional informational, navigational, transactional types of framework. And so I wrote a lengthy blog post about our process and how our scoring and things work in early 2019. But basically, we use search intent as a stoplight system, right? Green light, red light, yellow light type of thing, where if you see a very high 3-point intent score for video, it pretty much is telling you you're going to need video involved in your content in order to rank for this, or you might even only be able to rank for this with a YouTube type of upload. Now, fresh news results suggest that a lot of these ranking URLs on the first page of results are fairly recent, although in this case, it's not like it's a news result pack of very recent stories. It's more likely just very recent articles that have been published. And there's also a heavy research intent. We see there's PAAs on this one, and in the past we've seen featured snippets as well. Now, we also give you some Google Trends data here, so you can get a little bit of a better idea of long-term keyword history, any seasonality, subtopics from Google Trends, things like that. So mainly, I look for things that would tell me I need to produce my content differently on the intent tab. Now, for topic, we get into our topic model, and our topic model is based upon analyzing IBM keyword extraction for the top ranking results across a couple of desktop queries for your primary keyword. And so in this case, we've got a list of keywords, average number of times they appear per page on percentage of competitors, and these are sorted by percentage of competitors. Obviously, 70% of our competitors are using this term 4 times per page. We need it in our content if Google's realistically going to be showing us in results. So we give you a full set of results here, but you can see I just highlighted that keyword as one that's critical. And so the workflow that we've built is, rather than copy and pasting all this stuff from search results and keyword tools and putting it into a Google Doc, we just let you highlight the stuff that matters. So you, the strategist, can scroll down and say, well, I want the writer to definitely include these terms and phrases like users, and that's the type of keyword they'll use naturally. But I need them to talk about flexible layouts. That's pretty critical, right? And so you can go through here and continue to highlight, talk about different devices. Please talk about tablet as a midpoint, things like that. Media queries, did we get media queries? That's a pretty critical one. If sometimes that one shows up for these types of searches. And then we also have related searches. So responsive web design examples with source code, that's a good point. We probably should consider some code examples in here. Templates, we should consider linking out to some, or at least showing some, and maybe getting into a tutorial. So we've got all of these highlighted. Now I'm going to skip some of these other tabs for a second and jump right over to the brief. With our content brief, when you get in there, your first step is to start writing and telling the writer or content producer what you expect to be in the content. But it's kind of hard to do that if you have to jump back and forth and through from the report. So what we've done is made all of these highlighted phrases show up directly underneath the section where you need to talk about them. So when you get to the part of the brief where you say what keywords and topics are recommended or required, we've got all of the highlighted terms that you included sitting right here and ready for you. And then you have the choice of either leaving those there for the writer, which is usually what we recommend, or if you want to just reference them while you're writing and then, you know, replace them in the brief, like please use the following terms at least once in the piece, then you can actually go through and if you want, do a bulleted list, include these, and then anything that you don't want anymore, you can click on it, and in a few seconds that'll disappear from the list, and we can move on. So I'm going to go back to the keyword report here. The topic tab, I think we look pretty good. Now we've also got outline analysis. And so this is basically headline analysis of all of our competitors. And so one of the hardest things about putting together notes for a writer is sitting there and brainstorming, like what are all the things that need to go into this content? How should it be organized? Now, responsive web design examples, that's a little bit of a listicle type of piece of content where it's just going to be a long list. And you can see that right here, right? Envision's top ranking post has what is a responsive website and some examples of techniques, and then straight into a list of examples, and then some other what's your favorite responsive website types of sections, which is a pretty good format. We'll probably do something similar to that, but we've also got the W3 Schools example here, the awards.com example, Design Moto. We basically put everybody's H1 and H2 structure in here. And soon we'll upgrade this to show you a little bit more of a indented document structure type of format as well, and make all of those highlightable. Now, questions are another important piece of the puzzle. We go ahead and extract Google PAAs, as well as we go off and do other searches for top ranking Quora threads on the topic, so that you can go through here and get an idea for, all right, well, people want to know what responsive means. They obviously want to see examples. We should probably talk about techniques for how this actually gets done. And then I'm going to include some other references to examples here, because those are probably good ones for us to go pull from when our writer is researching examples to include. We've got some Yahoo Answers results in here as well. We put them at the bottom because they're not always as useful as Quora and PAAs, but they're available to you, and they're often pretty helpful in consumer segments and topics. Now, authoritative sources. There's a couple of different things going on here. We have, I think, 5 or 6 different sections. The first one we put in front of you is top links used, link occurrences. And so basically, if you have 10 competitors and 3 of them link to a list of parts article on responsive web design, or 4 in this case, we're going to put that right here on the list and tell you multiple competitors linked to this article. Now, in this case, what's going on is there's a bunch of competitors that are just kind of stealing and copycatting examples from one another. And so I don't want to do that. So I could almost include these links and tell the writer, please don't include any of the following examples because it's very derivative and will just look like everybody else out there. We want some more unique examples, but I'm going to skip that here. Now, we just have a couple other blog posts in here. There's a few different URL variations for that A list apart article, but I'm going to highlight the competitor articles that people are linking to and skip these other ones. Now, internal link targets wasn't turned on for this report, but let's say that we were doing this report for GoDaddy.com. We would actually go do an internal link search for GoDaddy for the topic of responsive web design examples and look for the top internal links that their content team might want to link to. And so that could be a landing page on free responsive templates that they offer. That could be another learn section or something like that. But we just replicate the process that your strategist is going to have to go through to go find the stuff that you should be linking to internally anyways. Now, the last 3 sections are a little less useful, but top government EDU links found, that can often be helpful. For example, this Stanford link on responsive web design is pretty helpful for a writer to kind of understand some of the more nuanced aspects of this. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. We'll do top related news. Less helpful here. None of the articles are sticking out from particularly notable sources that I want our writers to look at. And then if we find any top books from Google Books results, we'll highlight that as well. Maybe I'll do this Design Moto one as a recent piece. So authoritative sources, again, is entirely about things that the writer or content team should either look at and implicitly reference or explicitly link to as a resource. Now your competitors tab, other than the outline, that's the first time that we start seeing an actual breakdown of each competitor. And this tab, we use this for a couple of things. One is we can see a content score. Content score is like a rough estimation for how optimized a page is. And so 0 to 100 scale, how hard are they trying to rank for this particular keyword? We also show linking domain metrics and domain authority metrics, both of which are coming from Moz, average word count for the piece, and estimated traffic, which is data that we get from dataforseo.com. We can dive in here and get some more granular data, things like, obviously meta description, top singular terms on the page, which is more of a simple n-gram analysis. Organic visibility for this page, how many keywords are they ranking for, what is the top keyword if it's something different than the term we typed in, and then all of the external links that we found on the page, all of the IBM keywords that were extracted from the page, and the IBM entities. Now, there is a lot of noise in all of this, right? We don't usually want to put this type of information in front of a writer or a client because it's just overwhelming, which is why it's buried in here, but it's there for you as the strategist to reference so that you can kind of see the underlying data that goes into our reports. Now, the last two sections here are images and video. One of the things that people seem to miss all the time when they're doing content briefs is good notes on the visual content requirements for the content. Responsive web design examples, that's the type of search result where you're not going to rank for that if you are not including a list of screenshots and things like that so that people can visually see what you're talking about. And so we do two things there. One is we show you the top Google Images results for the phrase. And then the way I'll use this is to actually kind of give instructions to our writer, hey, I think we need some graphic mock-ups a little bit like this that show mobile, tablet, desktop types of layout changes. This Design Moto one's pretty good too, so I'll highlight that. And then the next thing we get into is our competitor image analysis. Now, this is kind of in beta, and these are not highlightable the same, but we try and give you a carousel of image examples that your competitors use so that you can quickly understand the visual style of the content that they're putting out there. So, for example, this Timpanus.net code drops piece has some really cool things where they mocked up the actual responsive screenshots for all of these sites. And you can even see, look, there's a little before and after for what the site looks like on desktop versus mobile. That's a really cool format. So I might actually go reference that when I'm telling my writer how I want us to portray ours, because that's pretty cool. So that's the type of thing that you can hone in on really easily with the image analysis without having to browse around every site and scroll on every single thing. Now, videos work similar to our Google image results. We just highlight any notable videos, and then what I might do here is highlight ones where I think, maybe our writer should reference that and actually watch that video, if not actually embed the video. So that's all of our data tabs, and you can see, I've been talking through this, so I've probably spent a little more than 10, 12, 15 minutes talking through it, but in reality, we can get through the actual study of these tabs when you're just working by yourself in maybe 5 minutes. Most of the time is spent on any extra additional analysis you want to do on specific competitors or sub-keywords and things like that. Most of the research time is what we're cutting down a lot with on Content Harmony, and we're moving more of your effort in producing a brief over to the brief itself and the data fields that we provide you. And so that's a good thing, because that's going to make it clearer to a writer or a client what needs to go into the content when we're highlighting that stuff. So we've got a few sections here: suggested title tag, headlines, social media titles. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit. I've got an older copy of this same brief that I'm going to reference. So I'm going to move that off in my other screen. This is an example of what a set of keyword briefs looks like on your projects tab. Now, one thing I should mention, Content Harmony is built around projects. So we've got, in this case, a fashion website, a hosting website, a news website. So for an agency, that's probably going to be clients. For an in-house team, that might be different styles of content, like blog content versus resources versus landing pages. You can structure Content Harmony however you want, but everything lives inside of projects. So all of my hosting website-related keywords are sorted out here, and running new reports is as simple as thinking up what you want the keyword to be. Maybe I want to look at top WordPress themes for realtors, and running a fresh report. And we go off and fetch all of that data live. So back to our brief. We've got a suggested title tag. We've got what is this content about, what keywords and topics are recommended. All of these kind of fit into our content overview section. A couple other things go in there. What key questions do readers have that need to be answered? You can see our highlighted questions there. Suggested content formats or other required elements. Internal and external linking requirements, additional resources that'll help the writer. So I'm gonna skip the writing process of these. I'm gonna paste in some examples of what we might put into each section. So over here in the title and headlines at the top, I like to use bullets here, and I'll do an actual title tag, and then I might even specify a separate social title for Facebook, Twitter, Open Graph, and I might specify a separate H1 if it's going to be different from the title tag. So all of that's sitting right there for the writer. Now, what is this content about? This tends to be the longest section, and the cool part about how we've built the briefs here is you can see if you just have a couple lines of information, this section stays pretty svelte. It's pretty thin, right? But if you want to expand and get really in-depth and even go so far as to do a full document outline, you can do that. And the text box, it just grows along with you and gets as long as you need it to be. So feel free to go long, feel free to go short. We see some teams where they really want to include an entire outline for the writer. We see other teams where the writer is more of an expert in the topic and the strategist leaves it up to the writer to decide what goes into the brief. And in that case, maybe you don't do an outline. Maybe you just do a paragraph with some things that you should include. But what I've built here is a suggested outline with H2, H3 structure as indented bullets, and those are as easy as hitting indent or tab, to bump those in. And I'll say, what is responsive design? How are responsive websites coded differently from regular websites? And then a sidebar on what are media queries. Great responsive web design examples, and then I've broken that off into e-commerce, SaaS, publisher, small business, because I think that's kind of a cool sub-breakdown that competitors haven't done. I'll include some responsive web design elements. So let's talk about how, let's show some menu examples. Let's show some form examples and show how those things go responsive. And then finally, I've got some responsive web design resources as kind of like a kind of an alternative to a conclusion where we can link out to some of our other resources as a company and maybe some third-party ones too. So that's pretty clear. A writer should be able to take this, build out each of the sections, and probably as much time is spent on finding the examples and doing screenshots and things as they might spend on writing the content. Now, keywords and topics, I like to let the keyword model speak for itself, but I've got a format here where I said in the outline example above, please be sure to include variations on the phrase structure of SaaS, e-commerce, publisher, SMB, responsive site examples so that we get some of that subterm optimization going on. And then all highlighted terms below should occur naturally at least once in the article, but will likely occur more than once. So I'm being explicit that I want these keywords to show up in the piece, but I'm being not too prescriptive because eventually what we'll be able to come back and do is go to our content draft grader here and grade this against our entire topic model as well as the keywords that have been highlighted. And so at some point you'll be able to come back and do that in Content Harmony, but for now I really just focused on making sure they've included these terms. Now, what key questions do readers have that need to be answered? Well, we've highlighted a lot of the questions, so I've just noted here that required questions have already been included in the outline above. However, I want the reader to, the writer, to review these queries and kind of understand what users are looking for. So they're good for examples to point the writer in the right direction. Now, our next section down here is suggested content formats or other required elements. In this case, I've already got the outline above, and so that's a lot of my formatting, but I've got notes here that we're going to need screenshots on all the examples, and I might go so far as to say, we want that desktop phone split that I showed you earlier. Screenshots should be custom, not copied from other articles. Examples of elements like forms, columns, etc. should focus on those elements and not the full page screenshot. So if I'm going to show you a responsive hamburger menu, I just want to focus in on that hamburger menu, not the entire page. Now, internal link requirements, external link requirements. Basically, is there anything that the writer has to link to? In this case, there's no specific external link requirements other than properly citing our screenshots and sources like that. But we should also link to our library of themes and templates for users who are already customers. So good example for a hosting company there. Now, additional resources that'll help the writer. I think of these as like things the writer should probably read to understand the topic better, but may or may not, depending on if they're competitors, or true business model competitors, not topical competitors, may or may not want to link to them. So I will add, please cite if the piece is particularly useful for our readers, or consider including these in the final resources section. Great. Now, if there's a competitor in there I really don't want to link to or something, I'll be more specific about that up here. But otherwise, I've got some good references for the writer to take a look at. Now, you notice we're shifting into a new section here. We've got the audience and brand overview. Telling the writer all of the keywords and things they need to include in the content is obviously important, but one of the biggest things that will happen is a writer will go off and write an objectively good piece on a topic that is not a good fit for the brand that's publishing it. And so what we want to do here is make sure that our writer, or and less or so our client, but our writer understands what are the primary audiences this content is intended for, and what's our brand's point of view on the topic. And so let's say that I am a hosting company. I'll say the primary audiences, most of the readers will be either site owners looking at examples or fellow web designers trying to come up with ideas for a website they're building. The first is our target audience, but we want the article to serve both audiences well. So making sure the writer understands what type of person's probably searching for responsive web design examples. And then here, what is our brand's point of view on the topic? Well, we want our piece to convey the following. One, responsive websites are a must-have requirement for your business. You probably see 20 to 80% of your website visitors using a mobile phone, depending on what type of business or website you're running. Two, all of our themes offered, as the hypothetical hosting company, all of our themes offered are responsive by default. So if you use us for hosting and you use one of our freely included themes, you're covered. That's the type of benefit that starts pulling in some of the brand messaging to an otherwise top of funnel content piece. Now, what's the call to action? Always important. Well, let's have them take a look at our responsive themes directory. Like if they're looking for examples, then why don't you look at the examples that come free with our hosting? Maybe you're in the market for hosting at the moment. Maybe you're not, but we might as well push you over there. And then also, here's some other articles you should read on the site that we've written about responsive design, or maybe, a link to a mobile features page or something like that. Now, the visual content section obviously is important here. We've already talked about screenshots as one of the formatting elements. So I might say, in addition to screenshots, we need a mobile tablet desktop mockup like the ones below. Something cool like that. And then I'm also, from my research, I'm aware of this cool other graphic from this Verve search company that shows how the blue sections collapse down and basically how things collapse into mobile. And so that may have come out of other research, or I've seen that piece before. So I'll say this example is a cool one. We may want a version in our own brand. Now, I don't want my brand to copycat these Verve search folks, but that's a style of graphic that we've seen a couple different ways if you Google different Google image results for responsive web design templates. So maybe we would want to make our own branded version or something like that. I might also reference the videos in here, like please embed one of the videos. If we have our own YouTube channel and videos, then by golly, please embed that content. But may or may not be relevant for your team. So wrapping up at the end, we've got metadata, and this is usually just a couple of seconds. I might paste a sample meta description that I want used and then tell the writing team, like, feel free to revise that. We've got CMS settings, so if you've got like weird steps required in your CMS or publishing process, we can make reference to that here. I've just taken kind of a standard WordPress CMS example of URL slug should be this. I can underline it if I want. Oops, show you the source code. Oops. And then tell you blog category should be web design. Now, recommended word count. If you scroll back up, we do show you the average word count is 1856. If we jump back to the keyword report, you can kind of scan and get the range. So just under 2K, 2K, 500, 5K on the longer end, 3K on the longer end, 7K on the longer end. There's definitely some length there. I think my writer, once they do my outline, will naturally hit the word count that we want them to do. So I'll put here 2,500 as suggested word count, fine to go up to 3, 4K if needed to fill out the outline well. No real ceiling as long as our formatting is good. And then we've got our miscellaneous notes section. And honestly, don't know what you'll put in here, but we've added it just in case you need it. And so this could be notes for other groups that are reviewing this. This could be additional notes on production process. I've seen teams use this for things like what's the maintenance look like for this content, like what should be done a year from now. If you reference back to the brief, like what should get updated. You can use it however you want. These can adapt and grow to the process that you've built. Now, if you get through this entire brief and you seriously have an example that we haven't covered, most of the time it probably fits into something else. If nothing else, what is this content about is a pretty good bucket category for things. But we've now migrated 10 or 20 teams to this format, and I haven't bumped into anything yet that would tell me there's other major stuff out here that's not covered by one of these sections. So that's one of the advantages for your team is you now have a consistent template. And so part of what we're offering for our onboarding process is we'll do that concierge migration for you. You send us 2 or 3 of your existing briefs, and we'll do the work to put it in the Content Harmony format and then schedule a training session with your team to say, all right, here's what the new format looks like. Here's where things need to go. And on top of that, here's a couple of things we spotted that we think you can improve about your existing brief template. So right off the bat, in your first month of using Content Harmony, you're already basically getting some consulting time from us to improve that process with your team. So that's it. Now, the last step of the process really is maybe I want to share this with a client or with a writer. And so I can go into incognito and drop that URL here. And what I get is a publicly shareable version that jumps straight to the brief. So you've got that URL that you can drop into Asana or Basecamp or Airtable or whatever you're using that just sends the writer directly over to the brief that they need. Now, right now, that's read only. We'll be adding a couple cool features here. One is the ability to leave comments on each section. So if a writer has questions, or if you send these over to a client and they have additional notes or feedback to leave, then there's a comment section on each one of these. You can start a thread. The other thing we'll be doing is giving you the ability to export this to Google Docs and Word and things like that. First up, we'll just simply let you copy this to your clipboard, and then you can go paste it in Desktop Word, Office 365, Google. You can paste it right into Asana or Basecamp or whatever it is if you want. You can paste it into Slack if you really hate everybody on that channel. That's up to you. So I hope that gives you a good idea of kind of the workflow that we use at Content Harmony and that we are advocating for content marketing teams, for SEO teams, to producing really great content briefs. I'm really excited to show you some of the other features that we've got on our roadmap to develop. This is version, it's not 1.0, but it's the first version that we've been able to push out to the public where we really feel like the product is solid. We can stand behind the results. We feel really good about the data that's coming in. We feel really good about the workflow. We've gotten great feedback from customers using it already. One of our agency teams said, I started putting these briefs in front of our client and they instantly don't have as many questions as they normally do. Like you send them a Google Doc and they say, well, where'd this data come from? Where'd that data come from? Having it in this structure kind of gives that client the confidence that all of this data is actually data driven. It's not something that came out of the strategist's brain, and that the content brief, like there's clearly some work that's gone into studying the report and analyzing the results. So there's a lot of trust built into using a more data-driven template like this, as opposed to just a raw Google Doc type of brief template. We've seen that same advantage with our teams, although not quite as clearly stated as that example. So I'd love to get you set up with a demo to show you more about how this works. Just go ahead and schedule that on our site at contentharmony.com/demo, and we can get you set up. We've got a bunch of reasonable price options for teams where, every brief will definitely pay for the hour of time it saves and for the data-driven improvements you're able to make in the content you're producing. So would love to show this to your team, love to get you set up with an account. Please reach out and we will go from there. Thanks.